And when you play on those kinds of emotions, a lot of these leaders are very clever in terms of being able to push those kinds of narratives. And what I think Trump has been very effective at in terms of his how he rallies his supporters is one, yeah, looking at that, playing on that fear, but at the same time making things look huge, as he often says. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Tip Talks, and we are on our second season. This is the first episode of season 2. And for those who are joining us for the first time, Tip Talks is a program where we not just analyze speeches, but we just really pick our brains in terms of looking at different aspects of public speaking and communication. And today, we will be looking at something that has been on the news, particularly in the United States lately, the US presidential debate between former President Donald Trump and incumbent Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris. So we'll primarily be looking not necessarily on the issues themselves, but we're going to look at how the debate itself was able to progress. So we'll be looking at how each side, or how President Trump or Vice President Harris was able to defend their side, how well they were able to articulate their points, and how well were they able to conduct themselves in a manner that is more or less up to standards in terms of what you expect from two high-ranking officials in the government. Let's start.
All right. So thank you, Jan-Ace. Hi, everybody. I'm Dino Santos, and beside me is Paul. Yeah. So I guess we won't need to introduce ourselves by now. You probably know who we are and what we do. So let's get right on it. Show.
Tonight, the high-stakes showdown here in Philadelphia between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. Their first face-to-face meeting in this presidential election, their first face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing after his last debate. Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special, the most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way forward.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face, historic. The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Okay, we could probably pause there so we can react to what they did one at a time. I'll let Jan-Ace take the lead.
Okay, so let's pause there. And that was the opening response by Vice President Harris. So, what do you guys think about how she was able to frame her response to the question, Dino and Paul, before I give my own thoughts?
I'd like to start with the very beginning, actually. When they entered the stage, I'm sure we all know the study of Morabian, where he talks about, physical communication accounts for 55%, tone is 38%, and the actual words are only 7. And the simple fact that Kamala went up and shook his hand was already, for me, it was, telling me, hey, come on, let's be friends. But he was more of he was trying to build a wall immediately. You could see it.
Mm.
You could.
Mm.
Okay. And so when she gave her response, and this is something that I've always been wondering about. Every time they have these debates, none of them ever answer directly first. I'm not saying they don't answer the question, but they never answer directly, yes or no, or whatever it is. Maybe it's the debate prep they do. Okay, that the instructions are don't answer directly. I'll talk about everything else first, then answer. But I find it a little unusual. Okay, because for me, I would have just said yes or no and given my reasons. Okay, and then talk about my plans. And if you notice also that when Kamala was answering, there were times she seemed to be searching for words.
Mm.
Okay, she couldn't really bring it all together. But at the end, we'll see, because I have to see the reaction of Trump. I've already seen it, okay, many times, but a lot of it also has to do with the way the other person reacts to what one person says.
Dino?
Okay, I'm with Paul here that they don't answer questions directly, because the question was, is the country better now than it was before? I mean, that's a straightforward yes or no question, so that you could start with a yes or a no, and then say, because, for example, that's why I believe that it's not fundamentally better. So like we're used to prep, and we're used to that particular framework for responding to questions. The way that Kamala stepped forward to shake the hand of Donald Trump was very, very, very sporting, but I think it was also calculated to win some points for her, because it shows that she is more of a sport than he is. I mean, after all, it does not have to be adversarial, because it's a debate. The debate is where people have the opportunity to engage in a dialogue, w- um, peacefully, cordially, and courteously. So her doing that scored her some points, I feel. Yeah, Trump is fond of building walls. So th- his reacting that way, even now, when you look at the screen, he has what I would just like to describe as a scowl. Like it's permanent part of the way he looks. If I had to think about the poster, uh that'd probably be my memory of him, because even comedians in Hollywood, let's see, Alec Baldwin, who does it so well on Saturday Night Live, he mimics that look, and does it uh, so well. Makes me think maybe he should have been the one in Pennsylvania standing there, because they both look so similar. He would have been safer. Anyway, so for me, even though she didn't answer the question directly, uh, the point goes to her so far, because of the way she handled herself. Although I'm uncomfortable with the way that she threw around what felt like catchphrases left and right, like tax cuts, words that she knew would resonate with potential listeners. Whether or not she could back those up, or whether or not she could really make them happen. Nonetheless, just like our own politicians, she said stuff that she felt people like to hear. Back to you, Janice.
Right, and thanks, Dino and Paul. I'd like to take off from both of your observations about the handshake first. So I'll offer like a different perspective, which I actually saw from some other analysts that analyze the debate after its airing. So for the handshake, some people actually said that it was a power move from the part of Kamala. If you have seen Trump shake people's hands in other instances, he shakes them in a very aggressive manner, so much that the person that's on the other end of the handshake has trouble letting go of the grip of Trump. It's normally a very strong grip, or it's something that's very vigorous. And by Kamala initiating the handshake, it was her trying to say that you can't push me around. I am your equal, and let's do this debate as equals. So that for me was a power move on the end of from the end of Kamala. Second, I agree that she didn't really answer the question directly. What I feel that she was trying to do was, and something that we won't see in a regular debate, is that this debate was not just meant for both sides to give answers, but there's really an attempt for them to appeal to the wider audience. And Kamala's answer was really an attempt to show that, unlike my opponent here, who is a billionaire, I came from a middle class background, which she repeats several times, and she will repeat later on in the debate several times. And I know and I've experienced your struggles. So I know what I'm talking about. It's not just an academic discussion for me. It's really something that I've lived through. So that for me was an attempt from her to say that this I am credible not just because I am the vice president, but I am credible because I went through the same struggles that you might have gone through. So it really was intentional, I think, for her to not answer the question directly.
You
Correct?
know, I'll
Yeah.
just add a little bit about the handshake of Trump. Actually, if you notice, and you notice a lot when he was president, and he would visit or encounter, let's say, other heads of state. When he shakes their hand, not only does he shake it vigorously, but he also pulls it towards him.
Right, right,
Okay,
right,
which is also a
right.
very I own you kind of deal. Okay. I mean that's what he's trying to say.
Right, right, right. So yeah, it really set the tone for what the debate was going, what what would happen in the debate. Okay, so
Okay,
let's move on to the response of President Trump.
Roger that.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like.
I guess we can pause there and let's. What do you guys think about President Trump's response?
Uh,
Go ahead, Dino. You go first.
um, two words: fear mongering. That's the way it came across to me because he started describing things that were happening. Like, if I really just let myself visualize what he's saying, then I would be imagining that there would be hordes of people running rampant, and well, to be fair, there were. I think during the BLM era or during the Antifa era, where the police were defunded, a lot of bad things did happen, especially in the very urban areas of the United States, where they simply stopped arresting people because they were way out of control. And I tend to agree that a lot of people could get through the border, especially through Mexico, Mexico and then Texas. So that became a big issue as well. So while most of the things that he said rang true, the way that he said it for me was designed to create alarm. And if I were somebody who didn't follow the news or didn't watch different sources of the news, so that I won't just get the sensational side of the news, but also the more moderate side, I would tend to think that America is really in big trouble, and that those hordes of people are all over the place. Like, it wouldn't be safe for you to go out in the streets anywhere. So that's my reaction to it. I feel like I just got bludgeoned into buying into that fear. True or not, probably true, but I would have wanted to hear something hopeful rather than something meant to scare me. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Good
Paul.
point. You know, if, well, let's. I'll take off with the word. Left off with hope. You know, something hopeful, and all the speeches that we still look at today, speeches from the past, they're all about hope. None of them is about it's the end of the world. We got to kill these guys, and none of them. Okay, for all I know, Hitler was a great orator as well. So was Mussolini, but none of the speeches were remembered. Why? Because they're all about hate.
Mhm.
Okay, then none of it was hope. Okay. Uh, well, anyway, uh, the one thing that Trump seems gets is if you want to convince somebody, and psychologically this has already been, data doesn't matter much. You have to get to them, in maybe emotional level, if you want to say, and that's something Trump does well. Although for me, he evokes the wrong emotion, as Dino's pointing out. Okay, he evokes the wrong emotion, and he didn't answer the question at all. Instead, he ran off. He ran off to what he does, to the one thing that he's got left, which is still the border control, which we also all know was all his fault anyway. Okay, that's the funny part. Okay, and the only one thing that I don't know if he agreed or disagreed, because Kamala said it will wind up with a 20% tax, which is what a tariff does. A tariff just puts a tax on everything you buy. Okay. So I said, but maybe when he started with, we're putting up a tariff, not a tax. It's the same thing.
You're
But
right.
but most people don't realize that. Okay. I don't know how many people are still buying these tariffs are gonna solve everything. I don't know how many people are still buying that. Okay. But it's powerful in the sense that he attaches to an emotion. Okay,
Mhm.
he doesn't care about the numbers. He just says or data. He just okay, and that's how he gets people maybe to follow him or to listen to him.
Right.
Jan-Ace.
Yeah, yeah. I'll take off from what both of you said about the play on emotions. So instead of hope, Trump was playing on fear, which is normally, if you read a lot of the literature regarding uh, political rhetoric, it's normally employed by a lot of people like Hitler, Mussolini, those who are they're either dictators or authoritarian leaders, which Trump has been labeled as, and it's easy for people to gravitate towards that. These kinds of leaders normally emerge during times of not necessarily unrest, but where people are unsure about the future. And when you play on those kinds of emotions, a lot of these leaders are very clever in terms of being able to push those kinds of narratives. And what I think Trump has been very effective at in terms of his how he rallies his supporters is one, yeah, looking at that, playing on that fear, but at the same time making things look huge, as he often says.
Mhm.
Uh, he used again millions and billions, which he uses a lot in his speeches. So he used millions, billions, huge. He positioned China as this big enemy, and then he goes on to position immigrants as the big threats to the jobs that Americans have. And it's really part and parcel of the playbook of a lot of authoritarian leaders. closer to home, of course, we've seen that play out with former President Duterte, who, from his end, drugs and criminals were his favorite enemy, and what he usually played on in terms of his fear mongering. So it's interesting how it's a bit of contrast with Kamala, who didn't really play on making things seem huge. It actually felt like her answer was very subdued and played more on not really a sob story, but again looking at where she came from. And Trump was more on looking outward on the things that we are facing right now as our enemies. So I think it's very interesting contrast in terms of the answers.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. So
I'd like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one,
Okay. So that was again another response from Kamala in terms of the question, the economy. So before I go to Dino and Paul, for our viewers who may not be familiar with Project 2025, which is referenced by Vice President Harris, in a nutshell, it's this manifesto that has been labeled as an alternative right manifesto that has been circulating in American political circles, that has been attributed to President Trump, although he officially denies that he had any part to play in this particular Project 2025, because it looked a bit extreme to some of the general public. So for, of course, the supporters of Trump, it's something that they were gravitating towards too. But it has been a controversial topic, to say the least, in the news. So yeah, maybe you could start off with Paul in terms of your reaction to what Vice President Kamala Harris said.
Well, the thing there that she ended with was probably the most striking, because Trump, he continues talking about his fear mongering, point. But at the end, Kamala said, "Hey, look, we're here to fix this. We have to work together," and all of that. Okay, and the one thing that Project 2025 does is it's very, and I've never read it, but I've listened to enough conversations about it, about people who have read it, and it's very exclusive, not inclusive. Exclusive in the sense that if you're not loyal to Trump, you can't be part of the 2025. You can't be part of the government. You can't be part of this new era. And Kamala was saying, "Hey, no, I'm a president for everybody, not just exclusively loyal to." And for me, that was the most striking part, because it's the opposite emotion. He was offering fear. She was offering hope. Back to you, Jan-Ace.
All right, Dino.
yes, in terms of delivery, Kamala comes across as more nurturing, gentler, certainly more charismatic. Um, Although in media, whenever I watch some of the footages that show her giving a speech, you find her now and then laughing, even in the midst of something very, very serious being discussed, she'll just inexplicably start to chuckle. And to me, that was a bit worrisome because, if I were a voter, I would think, am I voting for somebody who is capable of taking issues seriously? Or, remember, might be the person who will be in charge of the football, the football. And I'd like to think that she has the capacity to really be serious and think about the issues that are confronting her nation and the rest of the world. Having said that, she wins points with me again, if only because in terms of optics, she doesn't come across as vindictive, even when Trump was already railing against her and sort of belittling her a little bit. She just came across as still sport. In other words, she's not taking any of it personally. Still the courteous smile, despite some of the mudslinging that was going in her direction. So there is such a contrast between the two of them, especially in terms of delivery. So I wanted my comments to revolve around that this time. Um, on to you, Janice.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. The I felt that she carried herself with a lot of grace in that
Mm.
response. Of course, she was very firm in saying that this is part and parcel of the Trump playbook. That her point of view is sprouting a lot of nonsense, a lot of lies. But what we are trying to do is to be able to build coalitions and not to divide people. And I felt that in terms of showing that she was not going to be intimidated or lose her composure, even with all of these attacks from Trump. That I won points for me also, because I remember how the debate was between Trump and Biden, where just the few remarks coming from Trump would immediately lead to Biden also saying a lot of these uh, ridiculous statements, to say the least. So that is a great, I think, showing of composure from Vice President Harris. Okay,
I'll just
Uh,
add one more thing, and this is mainly in
okay,
response to what Dino was saying about, chuckled and all of that. I'll agree with that, but we should be able to hold them to the same standard. I mean, yes, she chuckles, but look at Trump. He's a convicted felon. Okay, right? And he starts talking about cats later on, and and he starts just spouting a bunch of lies. So let's when we look at this, look at it, give them the same level if you want to say.
mm.
And admittedly, the American media has been guilty of this. They're holding them to different standards for some reason. Okay, and they say, "Oh, that's just Trump." But then when Kamala says something, a little, oh, they jump all over it. You said, "Come on." I mean, and that's part of the American issue. But it's like you're holding two different standards here. I mean, I would prefer to have a lady who chuckles every now and then rather than somebody. Yeah, but I mean, we're not after perfection here. We aren't, because that's not going to happen. But at least you want to put them at the same standard. All right, that's all.
right.
Oh, one comment I'd like to add is that probably Trump wasn't expecting to go up against Kamala. He probably had the whole thing architected around having to compete with Biden, and against Biden, he was head and shoulders because Biden was so fond of having what I think the media started to call word salads, where
Mm, mm,
he'd say something and then forget what he was trying to say. So mid sentence, he'd just stop and then start with something else.
You, Dino,
yes.
sorry to interrupt you there. If Biden has word salads, what does Trump have?
Yeah,
Please, I said, look at the same standard. You know what I mean?
right.
Come
Yeah.
on,
But
man.
I guess what I'm saying is, in that matchup. between him and Biden, he would have just run away with it. But now that he is up against Kamala, who knows how to be charming, who knows how to chuckle, smile, be less in our lexicon, less picon. It doesn't look picon. Um, and besides that, when people tend to go after other people, sometimes they begin to make themselves look villainous, without
Mm,
really maybe intending to, but that's what they end up looking. And the one being attacked, especially if that person is just calm, smiling, cool, starts to look heroic. So I just wanted to add that as well.
right. Just before we resume the debate, just two quick reactions to both what you said and what Paul said. So first, with what Paul said, it reminds me of our previous episode and Tim mentioned on the confirmation bias. So
Love
that,
that.
that it circles back to how media portrays their side. And for what Dino said, it's I was listening to this podcast the other day. I think it was Ed Stracklide's podcast from New York Times, and he was interviewing this journalist who was covering the Trump campaign. And they said as much that the campaign managers of Trump really are designed the campaign in a way that they were expecting Biden to go all the way. So the worst at the time, Biden didn't withdraw yet. Yeah, the journalist was saying that the worst case scenario for the Trump campaign is for Biden to pull out, and that's what happened.
Mm.
All right.
All right, so let's
Uh,
go on. Here we go.
Have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So
Okay, let's pause right there.
okay. Uh, we go first with Dino now. So your reaction to the response.
My reaction is more akin to uh, being in a room where the oxygen suddenly just vanished. um, Trump really can come on like a main battle tank. Like, if I had to compare him to military weapons, he would come across like an M1A1 Abrams. I mean, you'd be foolish to stand in front of something like that rolling in your direction. Um, Although some of the things that he again, some many of the things that he said, not just some, many of the things he said do make sense in the sense that they responded better, certainly better than China did to the pandemic. China with their zero COVID policy, which was defined as we don't have COVID here in our town because we evacuated everyone out who may have had it. So of course it's zero in this location, but they just move all sorts of people somewhere else. Whereas in America, they didn't do that. They just made sure that people were supplied or had access to supplies. Um, and so yeah, he was the unfortunate recipient of a crisis that nobody around the world was ready for, although Bill Gates did warn us about it, and I'm sure other scientists in the past have spoken about it. But he was a quarantine, a pandemic leader, and what we needed then was strength, and he showed that kind of strength, and that's to the same extent that I am overwhelmed by the way that he delivers and he speaks. I'm also convinced that he did the best that he could uh, because of the circumstances at the time. So that's how I feel about his response.
Okay, Paul.
Uh, for me, it was just another pack of lies. I mean, I mean, Dino compared him to China. Why don't you compare him to New Zealand? The Americans lost more than 1 million lives during the pandemic.
Mm.
And the same Trump was the same guy saying, hey, let's inject ourselves with bleach and put UV lamps up you know where, and you're going to get cured. It's the same guy. You know what I mean? For me, he had one of the worst reactions. Considering if you compare him to other equivalent nations, the US fell flat on their face, and it was all because of him.
Mhm.
Okay, period. And it's funny how you use an M1 Abrams tank as an analogy, because how come a flower like Kamala can stop it? How come? You know what I mean? You could say, but it's for me, it's just another bunch of lies. The thing about Trump is at this point, he's been spouting those lies for. Okay, it's like the boy who cried wolf. It's always the same lie over and over again, and people still believe him. But if you do make an effort to really look at what's happening now with the polls, even in the swing states, it's not going well for him. Period.
Mm.
Okay, I think people just got tired of his of his lies. Okay, and if one doesn't work, he just tries to invent a new one. Okay, because that's how he gets his attention,
Mm.
right? So for me, it's just another bunch of crazy lies again, every single one of them. Okay, and it appeals to his base, and his base will never change. That will never change.
Mm.
But though, so what they're fighting over are all the in between people, all the people who have to vote still, or new registrants, and those who didn't vote last time. Those are the ones they're fighting over. Okay, there's no way you're going to change the mind of Trump's solid base, whatever it is. Okay,
Mm.
so they're fighting over all those guys. And for me, Trump is already beginning to lose it with this one because it's just one lie after another. Okay, over to you, Jan.
Yeah, it's again the Trump playbook where he makes things look big, makes things look huge. Aside from billions and millions, he also now he used greatest, phenomenal, trying to hype up and make things look larger than life.
Mm.
So when you're somebody who is already in favor of President Trump, then you Trump becomes even much more larger than life that he actually is. So it's easy, I think, to when you're talking the way Trump does. It's easy if you're not too particular about the substance of what he says. It's easy to get swept up in that kind of language. Oh, we built the biggest, greatest economy. We had a phenomenal response to the pandemic, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Then they start
it's
going like
easy.
this.
It's millions and billions, millions and billions. So he likes making things look huge. So remember how before he got insulted when somebody called his sand small. So,
I forgot about that.
so now I just remembered it now. So it really is whether or not he's actually telling the truth. It's easy to get caught up in that kind of rhetoric. If you're a particular kind of voter, if you're a particular kind of stakeholder in these elections. And Trump has employed that, I think, to very much to great effect. But now when he's up against somebody like Kamala, who is not easily started,
Mm.
there's a, you see the contrast now with somebody who can carry themselves with a lot of grace and without the baggage that his previous opponents have had. All right,
Okay,
so
so
let's
let's
look at
continue.
Kamala's response.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say.
Okay. Wow.
Okay, wow, feisty words.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start off with Paul this time.
What is it? Strong words there, huh? Well, she's putting the facts out. That's what she's doing. But I like the way she started. He has no plan. Okay, if you notice, she didn't start with a fact. She started with something that made a person feel like, yeah, he has no plan. What's he going to do? And what I find really strange is that was a question even in 2016. Okay, a lot of people said they like what he's saying, but he never told them how he's going to do it.
Mm.
Like, let the Mexicans pay for the war. Okay. Uh, and he got away with it, but now he's stuck with the fact that, hey, okay, now where's your plan? Okay, and that's something Kamala started with wisely. He has no plan. That she laid out her sources, if you want to say, which is what you should do in a debate, right? You write your sources, and she wrapped it up and says he doesn't care about you. Period. Okay. Thank you, Jan-Ace.
All
Back to
right,
you.
Dino.
Oh, I like the way that she argued her case, where she would mention Wharton University, dozens of Nobel laureates, because these are things that a discerning listener might fact check, might go back and look for, just to validate what she said, because she named names, she mentioned things that are possible for a viewer to verify, and I appreciate that, because in a debate usually everybody has an opinion, but it all boils down to what's the evidence that you can show, what's the proof, the statistics, the examples that you can mention to support your point of view. And she did that magnificently in this particular segment of the debate. um, and she did it with so much confidence that it makes you feel like, well, maybe I don't really have to check, but I probably will anyway. uh, because of how confident she says it. And remember at the start of the show, the hosts from ABC were saying that they had no access to the questions from the outset. So they had no idea what might be discussed. And there's no audience in the studio. It's just the two of them. So they weren't playing off the reaction of people in an empty studio. It was just the two of them having a conversation with the rest of the world listening, but not physically there. Because I think sometimes having a live audience alters the dynamics immensely. In this case, because it's just the two of them, psychologically, that might make Trump feel more um, more emboldened, as it were, to come on stronger, because there might be nobody who will boo or hiss or anything, because there is no audience in the studio. Or it could have worked the other way around. If there was an audience, bullies love an audience, and then so that might have emboldened him as well. But nonetheless, the way that Kamala did her argument, good support of her points. Back to you, Janice.
Right. And just to add to what both of you said, I also like how I think it's interesting also for this particular response. Kamala starts really addressing the audience directly.
Mm.
If you notice that she didn't just answer the question, she said, Donald Trump, and she looks straight at the camera and she says, Donald Trump has no plan for you. So she made it clear that she was actually talking to the audience. And in a way, I found that to be very effective, because now she's really involving the voters in terms of this particular debate. And the second thing that I also was able to take note of is she was able to attack Trump's character without crossing the line of uh, I'm looking for the right word, but without being too personal. She attacked Trump's lack of a plan, and she attacked Trump's how Trump has always been in it for himself, and that for me is a good way to challenge your opponent without it descending into something very childish, as we saw in the Biden Trump debate, where they were basically calling each other names already, talking over each other. It was two cranky old men talking in that last debate. But here, it goes back to the facts. And it goes back to a certain level of decorum for the vice president.
Mhm.
Actually, just to
Let
build on what
us, yeah,
Jan-Ace said, that's it's a coaching principle. You attack the behavior. You don't attack the person. So
right, right,
part of your effectiveness as a coach is you know how to describe the behavior. Okay,
right.
not just say Jan-Ace ikaw kasi you're always late, or you're always contradicting me. Yeah, those are attacks. Those are personal attacks, rather than saying, Jan-Ace, I notice that every time I say something, you have a strong opinion against it. It's not like you're always attacking me.
Right, right, right.
Okay, so
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it. She attacked her behavior, not
right,
necessarily
the
his
personal.
behavior. Rather, it's not necessarily the person. She attacked his behavior, not necessarily something calling uh, Trump names or whatever.
Mhm.
Okay,
At this point, I guess the rest of the debate would probably be like this. So, I think it might serve us better to go to what you mentioned was the closing.
the closing
Yeah.
statement.
Yeah. So
Okay,
let me
so
just
we can look at the closing statements from both
let me just
both the
yeah.
parties.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
Okay, so let's react
So
to this one.
that was the closing statement from Vice President Harris. So I'll give the floor first to Dino.
In terms of optics, my feeling is that she's got it. In terms of the message, she's got that loud and clear as well. It feels like she might be able to offer a clearer and better alternative because she's sort of like a new player in this race because she entered when Biden backed out. It makes me wonder, how does Xi Jinping think about her? Because Trump is fairly predictable, if you know what I'm saying. Like make America great again. Think in terms of the billions and like he's fond of his vocabulary. If so he has a lot of adjectives to use. Um, so my feeling is, when I compare the two, Kamala is talking more to the heart rather than Trump seemed to be selling something, and it's hard for me to buy it. So, Kamala is ahead on points as far as this debate, especially the way that she carried herself and the way that she phrased her thoughts. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Dino. Uh, well, I'm with you with everything you said. She was talking to the people. And the one thing that most people don't realize, and this she mentioned, is while she might appear to be a newcomer, she's been in the government for more than 20 years.
Mm.
And she's also served in all three branches. Something, oh, yeah, wow. I said, so maybe she's not known, but she definitely has the goods.
Mm.
Okay, so that's really not, and that was one strength Biden had because Biden had been in there for so long. He could easily build coalitions and come up with agreements. Okay, that was his strength. That's not Trump's strength. Okay. Uh, and it's interesting how you mentioned how what's his name? The leader of China,
Xi
Yeah, Xi
Jinping.
Jinping. Yeah.
Xi Jinping. You know, people like him and other people and other leaders actually like Trump because he's so easily manipulated.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember when he was elected in 2016.
Mm.
Okay, the then Prime Minister of Japan, I think it was Abe. You know what he did? He gave Gold Trump solid gold golf club, and from then on, he was his friend. Okay. Now, anybody who's smart knows this. Okay. So, in many ways, they like Trump because he's so easily manipulated.
Mm.
Okay. Maybe Trump doesn't believe that, but that's what's happening. Okay. How's my audio? Can you hear me?
Yep,
Okay. All
you are
right.
clear.
Anyway, so in terms of how she delivers, she's definitely talking to the heart of the people, which is something that she came across with well here. And this is straight from John Maxwell. So when you communicate, there are four H's you're chasing: heart, hope, humor, and heart, hope, humor, and what's the other one? I forgot the other one. I have heart, hope, humor, and help. Okay, she She offered three of them. So there's nothing humorous about what she was talking about. But she offered three of them: heart, hope, and health.
Mm.
Okay, so she connected well in that sense. Over to you, Jan-Ace.
All right. So just to add to what both the gentlemen said, I think what was interesting also with the closing statement made by by the vice president was how she circled back to her experience as a prosecutor. It If you look at some of the history of the not the history, but if you look at the previous presidential run of Vice President Harris back in I think 2016, that was actually a point of contention against her because that was the time when BLM was a very controversial issue. So of course there was a segment of the Democratic voters that didn't like the image of the police, and her status as a prosecutor was something that was a point of contention against her. But now she's circling back to her past as an attorney, as a prosecutor, and it's working in her favor as both a showing her strength, what she can give as a leader, but contrasting herself with Trump by, as Dino pointed out, that nurturing spirit. I am somebody that can make decisions, the tough decisions, stand toe to toe with my political opponents, but I care about you. I can nurture you. And as a strong leader, I hear you. And that I felt was very effective in terms of the imagery. In terms of the substance, if you listen to it very carefully, there's still a lot more that you could do in terms of really concretizing what she wants to do. But I feel like just in terms of optics and being able to present herself out there, she looked very credible and very presidential. Okay.
Okay, so we'll go on to Trump's closing statement. Here we go.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News president.
All right.
Okay. So,
Woo.
the final reactions to Trump. Okay. Paul,
Well,
start
he's
it
true to
off.
form. He's lying it through the whole thing again. Everything is a solid lie. The funniest part is, and then let's ask the two of you, what's the job of a vice president?
Mm.
Well,
No, really.
there's much
What's the job of a vice president?
and they here she's a spare tire here
Right.
in the
Exactly.
Philippines.
No, but even in the U.S., the job it's the vice president isn't the one making law. How do you call making decisions about the country? He's the last person, or the vice president is the last person the president will ask advice from. But it's still the president who decides. So, sure, he's still debating Biden.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the funniest thing I said. What have you done about it? I go, she's the vice president. First of all, that's one thing.
Mm.
And then everything he said, come on, the border issue was a problem he chose to keep open, and everybody knows that also. They came up with a bill, and he told his colleagues that don't approve it. I need the border open and make it gulo. If you want to see, it needs to be a problem for him to run. That was his problem. The thing about Taliban now, if you actually look into it, it was all his fault. Okay, so it's just a whole bunch of lies again. Okay, and yeah, the thing, millions of come on, immigrants coming in, being how do you call it? They're all criminals. Venezuela now must be a peaceful place. As all the criminals from Venezuela went over to the United States. I go, what? You know what I mean? Okay. Again, the thing about these lies aren't okay. They're the same lies that he's been telling ever since.
Mm.
Okay, so maybe the people got tired of it. They found out the truth or whatever. Yeah, so for me, it was just a bunch of lies again. Uh, and for me, it was just way off because there was nothing useful in what he said except that you're lousy. That's all he said. Okay.
Mm.
Dino.
Okay. My thoughts on Trump center around his brand. He does like to feel that he's in charge, and he makes no pretense of not wanting that sense of being in control, because I remember the time when he went to I mean, like, he refused to leave the White House, and then all those people were storming it and just vandalizing the place, because he didn't want to leave. uh and the thing about the way that he communicates, and especially the way he looks, is I have a feeling he's aware that he's not really looking as good as he could if he really wanted to, but he can't do anything about it anymore. It's like, when the snow is powdery and soft, it's fun to stomp around and, like, come on strong and powerful. But when the snow is no longer powdery and it turns into ice, it becomes really slippery, and people who don't realize that will step and slide, and before you know it, they can't stop themselves, they just go all the way downhill. And so, from my perspective, his closing remarks, for lack of a better term, sounded almost desperate, uh,
Mm.
because it was so full of hyperbole. He was making so many sweeping statements, that instead of building confidence in me if I were a potential voter, it just made me feel like, dude, you're clutching at straws. um, it's the same thing from before. It's the same thing now, and you've made yourself very predictable, and I guess that's why everyone. Well, I'm not saying everyone. That's why some people probably like that, the sense of predictability in him, because then they can make plans based on his being predictable. But then other people are, as Paul said, are tired of the lies, are tired of the meanness. The world is already full of strong men, strong leaders, and look at where it's at. Maybe we need something different to prevent things from going all the way downhill. um And to me, I I will confess, I would have wanted him to do better, but he didn't. Not in this closing statement. It's almost as if there was an undertone of him sounding like he was losing steam, and I'm not saying he's giving up, but he probably in the back of his mind he realized I can't lock horns with this. Somebody who refuses to engage me in the way that I am trying to get her to, because she's he's fighting by different rules, and she refuses to let herself get dragged in. Uh, the simplest analogy I can say is sometimes when a bully wants to hurt you, he wants to make you fight his game, but she
Mm.
refused. And that's why to me, he didn't do so well in his closing statements.
Maybe
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
maybe the word you're looking for is it's his last name was full of hate
Yeah.
or anger. That's it,
Mm.
huh?
I agree with both of you gentlemen that how it's one, yeah, uh, it it really reeks of Trump was basically thrown off his game, I think.
Mm.
And it was one long statement of hyperboles. And it was very reactionary. I think that was very telling. When Kamala gave her closing statement, she talked about what she wanted to do for the voters, what she was going to do, and where she was coming from. In contrast, Trump started off by reacting just to what Kamala said, and then went on and talked about his usual talking points in a manner that seemed much more disoriented than it normally is. And I feel that he was baited into a lot of traps by Kamala if you watch the entirety of the video. So he didn't win this debate for me. He didn't win this debate for me.
Mm.
So it it remains, but it might be the reason why he doesn't want a second debate. I don't know, but he's closing his doors on a second debate, and we can only speculate as to why. But maybe because he's also he wasn't prepared for
Mm.
a non-Biden. Yeah.
All
Okay.
right.
Well,
So
if we
So
were to
yeah.
score it, yeah, he lost.
yeah, same here.
You know what's funny about this
So
whole
yeah.
thing is, uh, the Kamala's even told Trump's group what they were going to do.
Mm.
We're going to bait you on these things, and he still fell for it. That's the crazy. But to see that's what I mean by he's easily manipulated. Okay,
Mm.
Yes, and it really really shows if for viewers who would want to watch the rest of the debate, there were multiple times when if you are a discerning viewer, you would see that Kamala was really trying to bait him. And
Mm.
that last statement, I feel, was a culmination of all of those things where he lost his composure throughout the debate.
Mm.
All right, so that wraps up our analysis of the U.S. presidential debate from a few months ago, a month or two ago. Next, next time we will actually be looking at the recently concluded U.S. vice presidential debate, where we will see the running mates of President Trump and Vice President Harris, which is Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz. So, as always, I'd like to encourage you or invite you to like, share, and subscribe our videos on our Facebook, YouTube pages, or Facebook. And as always, as we say, learning is a never ending journey with limitless business.